Welcome, Life Sciences. Welcome to another exciting life science lesson. What are we starting with today? We're starting with an extremely important, section of the work, and that is going to be cells. When you had a look at the biochemistry section, you would have had a look at all the inorganic and the organic nutrients, and we're now going to kind of put those together to come up with this concept of what a cell is. Now, I posed an interesting question on the board. If you have a look here, I wonder if your mind can actually, take in the volume of what I'm talking about. And I've put down the board, have you ever wondered how many cells are in your body? And I Googled it, and generally the answer that I came up with was 37.2 trillion. Now, I'm not a maths person, but I just know there's a heck of a lot of noughts that are going on to go to that thing. And that is what you're made of. All these things called cells. So we're going to look at today, we're going to look at this whole concept of what is a cell? And remember, when we're looking at a cell, we're going to build up further what is a tissue, what is an organ, what is a system. So today we're going to lay down the foundation of a lot of work that we're going to look at later. Now, when we look at this concept of the cell, we're going to do the general concept. We're also going to look how things move in and out of a cell. So there's going to be a lot of terminology during this section. So as I always say to you guys, please make sure that you go and have a look at these terms. I think they're going to be very new to you. You might never have heard them before. And sometimes you might also battle to pronounce them, to say them. So try and go over it. Go and look in your textbooks. Make sure that you understand what this concept is that we're looking at. Now, when we look at what a cell is, when we look at all living things, I always teach my grades, there's a little acronym that I look at, and it's called, Mrs. Some people say Gref, or some people say Gren, And here it means that all living things must be able to move, Cellular respiration. They must be sensitive. That doesn't mean that they cry. That just means that they are sensitive to things around them. All living things must be able to grow, to reproduce, to excrete, get rid of wastes, and to feed. So it's a nice little acronym that I use there. And when we're looking at this living things, all living things are made up of this thing called a cell. And that's living things. So I've put here a fun little picture, but it's plants and animals. And there's even stuff that we can't even see, that we're going to consider as living. Now, when it comes to the study of cells, you need to understand that it's become a technology. What scientists and biologists used to understand about cells is, if I could say, a fairly recent concept, And why I say recent is it's all about technology. And the technology I'm talking about is the microscope. We have now been able to get such a greater understanding of these really, 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 really small things because technology has allowed us to do so. Okay, so what am I talking about? When we talk about the microscope, I don't know, maybe some of you in your classes are privileged enough to have a light microscope, I know I'm lucky enough, I have a few of these in my classroom, and my kids in my class are able to have a look at cells. Now, the reason why I put this one up is because it's the first thing, the practical I do with my children in my class. I get them to have a look at an onion cell. Now, if you're having a look at what that is, I'm going to show you. We're going to look at the following things when we get to a cell. A cell has got something that's around it, something that's in it, and a very important something that's in it. And that we're going to have a look at the terminology just now. So if you're lucky enough, you would have had a light microscope, light emitting microscope. Now, the ones that we're going to find at the universities and all these places, right? This big, right, microscope is called a transmission electron microscope. And what it enables us to see is often what we call a micrograph. Now, what of the pictures I've put up over here? There we were able to see just a simple cell. This one, this is an animal cell, and this is a plant cell, and we are able to see such great detail because of this microscope. Very often, right, maybe in your tests or in your textbook, they're going to show you what the things we look at. We're going to give you a diagram, and very often we're going to show you what it actually looks like in real life. Then the last microscope that we're looking at is called a transmission electron microscope. And if you have a look over here, okay, this is a microscope that shows us organisms in 3D. Now, these organisms that we are showing here, right, are part of COVID, right? The SARS-CoV-2, the virus that is, right, the pandemic that we have. And what we can see is a virus is something extremely, extremely small. And this machine allows us to have a picture of what the virus looks like in 3D, right? What it gives you an idea of its shape, of its structure, etc. So what we've noticed through time is because of the technologies that we now have, we are able to see, all right, these really, really tiny structures in a great amount of detail. Now, when it comes to a cell, there are two types of cells that we find. Now, the first one is what we call a prokaryotic cell. And if we were to put it in a timeline, these are the oldest living cells. Now, when we look here, the prokaryote is a single cell, a unicellular cell, and falling under this category is going to be bacteria. They are the oldest living thing. And what we find is that they were very, if I could use the word simple. They had a simple structure. They had something around them. All right, we're going to look later at this concept of a cell boundary. They had this jelly-like substance inside it, right? And then they had their DNA, because we were looking at this whole concept of reproduction, carrying on our genetic material. But when it came to living things, they were very, what we call simple. Now, if we have a look at when we look at classification, all right, later on, organisms over time have shown a pattern of becoming more complex. Simple in the beginning, and then as time has gone by, so they've become more complex. And that is the same that's happened with living things. Bacteria was the first living thing, all right, on Earth. And as time went by, we saw more complex characteristics in organisms, both plants and animals. Now, with that complexity, let's have a look here. We find a cell, it's called a eukaryote. And what it basically means is this cell can do more complex things. Now, I know this sounds like a bit of a mystery, but as we go through the whole structure, you're going to see what I mean. What it simply means is there are more things, we call them organelles, in these cells, and they are able to do more. It doesn't mean that they are better. It just means they are able to do more things. And we are going to concentrate in this section on the eukaryotic cells. You will look at prokaryotic cells a bit later. Then what we also look at is the following, that eukaryotic cells, right, can be divided into an animal cell and a plant cell. So we're going to find that plants and animals have got different structures because sometimes they need different things. They have a lot in common, all right? There are things that they have that are the same, but a plant and an animal do things differently, so they must also have things that are different. Right, so when we look at the end here, we need to be able to see, is it a plant, is it an animal, and why do we need to know that? The last concept that we need to look at is this concept of what is unicellular and what is multicellular. Now, uni means one. And when we talk about one, you need to understand the concept that a single cell, one cell, can be living. There's an amoeba, there is bacteria, there's some protists. One single cell is enough for it to be a living organism. It undergoes all those concepts of Mrs. Wren. However, again, what did we know? Things usually went from simple, all right, to more complex. And with that complexity, we made organisms that are multicellular like us. We've got lots of cells that are put together because they need to do more. All right, guys, so with those basic concepts behind us, we're going to take a quick little break and then we're going to be right back.